Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock this evening on Monday, March 11th, 2024. Ms. Peck, would you call roll, please?
John Kreischer.
Here.
Pat McKee.
Yes.
Cody Nicolai.
Here.
Jennifer Paoli. Here. Joanna Reyes. Corey Sillers.
Here.
Lance Trollope.
Here.
Karen Vandenberg. Here. Jim Boucher.
Here. Please stand with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. And are we all here? Okay. First of all, I'd like to recognize Ms. Sisson this evening. That's the first thing that we'd like to do. Jordan is a math teacher at Horace Mann Middle School and was nominated for the Resolution of Commendation by Horace Mann Middle School Principal, Dr. Robert Phelps, for earning National Board Certification through the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Dr. Phelps' reason for nomination is Ms. Sisson is passionate about teaching and teaching our students. I am so proud of her achievement of completing the National Board Certification. This commendation is a direct reflection of Ms. Sisson's dedication to our district and perseverance to her professional advancement. And knowing enough about that work, you have put a lot of work into it. I know that specifically. So with that, congratulations, Jordan. And I think we have some things we want to do.
Yeah,
right now.
we'll do a little photo over here, right? Yeah.
Do we have a plaque? Yeah.
There we go. Graduation purposes, we always talk about. Time for a speech.
And with that part of pomp and ceremony taken care of, I'd like to seek a motion to approve Jordan Sisson to receive the resolution of commendation.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate that. And again, job well done. With that, I would like to recognize speakers and students who wish to make public comments. But before we do, we'll find out if we have any speakers. Do we have some speakers? Okay. Let me continue then. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. Please identify yourself by name and state your address. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration, and Ms. Peck will identify the time remaining up on the monitor. And with that, our first speaker and only speaker is Deb Elby. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. All right. So for those that don't know me, Deb Albee. My address is 233215 County Road O in Wausau. And I teach kindergarten at Rib Mountain Elementary. And I'm here as our WEA Vice President just to give you our monthly update as to what's going on with us. This upcoming Wednesday, we are holding a meet and greet of those of you that are running again for school board and then some new people that are also wanting to be on our school board. We have invited everyone to come to Whitewater Music Hall Wednesday between 4:30 and 6:30. It's open to the public, so everyone here is welcome. We've invited all of our teaching staff and those not teaching to come and join us. And we'll just hear what people why they want to run, why do they want to be part of our school board. And it's a really hard job. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for those that are running again and those that are also running that aren't here tonight. So if you're free, come and join us. The other thing, just as always, Dana and I continue to meet with LAT every month, and we talk about things that are going on in our teaching world, how they could help support us. We find out what we can do to help support them. And always our goal is for moving things forward in a positive manner for our staff and our students. And especially this time of year when we're talking about budgets, I know that's coming up soon. It's always a hard time. So we want to be there to help support everyone, and we value our teaching staff as much as you do, and we just want to do what we can to help. So thank you. You guys have a great night.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7, approving the consent agenda, appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contract increases, separations, resignations, contract decreases, terminations, leaves of absence, retirement, minutes closed session of February 6, 2024, regular session of February 12, 2024, special session of February 15th, 2024, and special session of February 26, 2024. Payment of bills, budget status, and investment report, donations to the district, which they are Myron Construction, Karen Carlson, Chris Smith, Laura Witt, American Online Giving Foundation, Georgia Bratz, I shouldn't miss that name, sorry, Georgia, Tony Carpenter, Quick Trip, and Wisconsin Building Supply. 2024-2025 CISA 9 Shared Services Contract, and with all of that, I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude and for the donations to the district.
So move.
Second.
Jim, I do have a question on that CISA contract.
Go ahead.
So there's 2 positions in there that we're apparently paying them for, an occupational therapist and a speech language pathologist. Why do we fund those through CISA?
Yeah. Wendy, is it the difficulty in finding those positions? Yes.
It is, and we don't necessarily use all of those positions in the same way that we would use that position here. So they flex in and out, like for example, the speech and language pathologist does do some virtual services for us through Wade. And our occupational therapist is not a full-time occupational therapist. And part of that would be like maternity coverages and those types of things that we have to work through throughout the school year.
Okay, so we pay them essentially for the full-time staff, and then however they're allotted within the district, they're doing full-time work for us under this contract.
Depending on whatever we have I can't see it up there looking forward to next year, but we try to plan for those maternity leaves that we
Okay,
may have, and they help absorb some
Okay.
of that workload.
thank you.
It's one of the benefits of CISA's, CISA 9 specifically, so that we can get help from them when it comes to positions that we have difficulty in filling. And that's a good question, because a lot of us don't know that those are the services that CISA 9 will give us. So thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8, budget presentation. Is there anything else to add? I'm going to just read a couple of things here. It's up to you, John. Well, let me just go to you.
This one's new.
Is this new?
This is new
Okay.
information tonight. Yep.
All right.
I know it's under old recurring business.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll add it to the new.
Yeah, Josh and I are gonna, pardon me, I'll turn this on. Josh and I are gonna tag team this, because Josh doesn't have the history of of all the budget developments and whatnot. I'm gonna speak to the first half of this, and then Josh will take over because he has a better working knowledge of our current financial situation. And just to front load this, what we're hoping to get from the board tonight are 2 things. One, kind of budget priorities. We're going to share with you what we currently use to develop the budget, the high-level priorities, and so we're hoping to see if you've got anything to add to that. And then secondly, we've got a couple of strategies that we want to share with you. We want to get your reactions to those. So, Cassie, can you go forward? So, that's what we're talking about. Okay, next. Next one, there we go. So this is just a reminder, and again, some of this is for the board, some of it obviously is for the audience as well. Our revenue limit is tied to our enrollment. Our enrollment's decreasing, so of course that impacts our revenue limit. So that presents one challenge. The other lines on there are about economic, the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. You can see it's fairly high, about 45%. So challenges, the needs that our students bring to schools are increasing as well. Next, Cassie. Speaking of challenges and opportunities, we receive a number of multilingual students, refugees, immigrants, others. We're up to, if I'm wrong on this, somebody can correct me, I think we have about 200 students in the district that are multilingual. And we're getting new every day. So we're glad to have them, but obviously they present some different needs. So you're familiar with the Newcomer Center that we created. And so this is just kind of summarizes where the students are from, 40 different languages. I will say that Mrs. Libby White, who's coordinating this effort, is doing a good job of identifying resources. I know I think she just got a grant from one of our local foundations for a very cool piece of technology, an interpreter, like an AirPod kind of a thing, and you can select the language. So one teacher can speak to a class and have up to 6 different languages interpreted simultaneously. They don't do all languages, but that's one more tool that we're hoping to acquire. So. Next, Cassie. So what you're looking at here is on the far right is the Wausau School District. You'll see these. We only put 2 years of data in here. So on those 2 blue columns to the right, that's from the years 2021 and 2022. And on the left, you'll see kind of a key. So blue is the percentage of the dollars that we invest into, and this is all given in per pupil amounts so that it equalizes out the sizes of the district. But you can see that about half of what we spend each year is on salaries. That next one down, orange, is benefits. So that's roughly 75% of our budget. One thing that I think everybody's aware of, but it's really critical in this budgeting time, is that people are the key to our success, and so they're where we invest most of our funds. The next one down, the green, is purchase services, which is also some people. We'll break that down a little bit later. And then a few other items down below, which are 5%, or actually many of them are less than 1%. A couple of things I want you to take from this graph is that to the left of us are several of the districts in the state that are what we would consider our peers. They're similar in size, they're similar in demographics. You'll see Stevens Point, Sheboygan, Oshkosh, Neenah, La Crosse, Eau Claire, and Everest. And you'll see that the percentages, the relative percentages that schools invest are very, very similar across those districts. I'll pause there just for a minute because there's so much in this. Does anybody have a question on this one? Okay, we'll keep going. This just kind of breaks down what's in that purchase service. You'll see a wide variety. This does include our student transportation. It does include our CISA payment that the board just approved, and you can see the rest of it there. So it's a wide variety of things that we invest in. Next, Cassie. The purpose of this is just to let people know that when on each column is a year of our budget. On the left-hand side is what was budgeted. On the right is the actual expenditure. So you'll see that the budget has been very accurate, very, very tight over the last number of years, budgeting to within just a couple of percent. 2020, 2021 kind of threw things off with the pandemic and the ability to hire staff, ESSER funding, things like that. But we budget very, very tight, and we come in just a little over or a little under that budget number typically. And this is funds 10 and 27. Obviously, we have other funds, but this is the lion's share of our funding. Next, Cassie. little bit deeper, just a few items. We could spend days on this, but I wanted to share this one. It's an interesting way to look at a few of our object areas. So on the top, and I've said this before, but most of our funds are invested into salaries. So what you're looking at in that top horizontal row, in the gray area, you'll see dots. Each dot represents one of those peer districts. On the left would be the district that invests the least per pupil in student salaries. On the far right would be that which invests the most. That line is the average amount, and you can see that we are, third from the top in terms of the amount we spend per pupil on employee salary. So that is, again, we value people, we invest a lot in them. The next one down is our benefits, and then I just put a few in there that people are kind of familiar with, taking care of the property, our utilities, travel, which includes our bus contract, so you can kind of get some very small amounts once you drop down from salaries and benefits, right? Questions on that one? I don't know if we've shared that one with the board before. It's kind of a unique.
The salaries include administrator salaries too?
That's all employees. Okay, next, Cassie. Couple of trend lines. So the orange line is our student enrollment, and you can see, I think this is from 2016. So we're down, I can't read that number, about 5%, if I can read that. 5-6%, and we've the blue line is our relative change in teacher staffing. So you can see we've maintained relatively flat teacher staffing. Again, people are the key to our success, so we've made those decisions consciously. But that is part of what contributes to the challenge. And if you go to the next one, we broke out our administrators. Again, above that, the pupil trend line, but a little bit below. There have been administrative cuts over the last couple of years. Of course, a much smaller group, so a single change has a much larger percentage. Next one, Cassie. So this one, this is a scatter plot. Again, you can see the school districts that are included in this on the right. The colors pertain to their colors in that scatter plot. This is showing the relationship between salary and fringe versus experience. This one is just teachers. I'll tell you one thing about the data. This data comes from DPI. And teachers and principals are very clean in terms of the data. When we get into support staff or district level employees, everybody categorizes people differently, so it's difficult to get accurate data. So I'm not picking on teachers, but this was some of the data we could get, and so that black line in the middle is the trend line. That's the average rate of increase for salary and fringe by years across the bottom, salary on the left. So if you go to the next one, Cassie, we pulled out Wausau, and you can see that our salary and fringe compared to versus experience is right on that trend line. So our salaries and fringe are competitive. Next one. One more way to look at the data, and again, we're focusing mainly on people because that's the main areas in which we invest. So this is the trend in staffing for Everest on the left. Next to them is Eau Claire. The green lines are showing the number, they're relative to the number of FTEs, to the number of positions. The orange line that you're looking at is the student ratio to that employee group. So again, Everest on the left, Eau Claire is next, Stevens Point, Sun Prairie, Wausau on the right. So you can see the districts are all relatively the same size, have a similar number of FTEs. This one is all certified staff, by the way. I don't think I pointed it out at the beginning. So this is teachers, principals, anybody who's licensed is in this group. And then you can see the relative student to certified staff ratio and the trends. The next one, it shows the same information in relation to our support staff. Okay. Let me pause again because I've shared a couple of things here. Are there questions? Okay, next one, Cassie. I think I have one more slide, then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vigut. When we look at our budget, the first thing that we think about is how do we minimize any negative impact to students and how can we improve experiences for students? Obviously, the financial health of the district is critical in order for us to exist and thrive. We certainly want to be an attractive employer, again, key to our success. And then we have to comply with all of our regulations and all our contractual obligations. Those are kind of the top 5, if you will. So so we've talked a little bit about, internally about how we're going to balance our budget, and Josh is going to go into that in a little bit here. But in addition to these, we're wondering if the board has other areas that you would like us to emphasize, protect, prioritize. Just wondering if people have, if any board members have thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily a priority, but one of the things, and Josh, maybe we can talk more about it during your presentation, is that I think we're at the point now where we need to start looking at detail, meaning hierarchy, spans of control, layers of leadership, ratios of, well, I'll just leave it at that, and also at a specific school by school analysis, where we can take a look at all of the staffing that goes into each school. I shared something that we could potentially use last November, and frankly, I think it would be good information to have as the demographer comes up with whatever recommendations he may or may not come up with, for us to be able to have a school by school analysis and figure out exactly where we might be able to bring out some efficiencies or not.
I completely agree with you. I know we have a tool that we use internally, and I would love to sit down and walk you guys through the tools we use and get your input on how we could make it better.
Okay,
So-
yeah, because the assumption is that, when you look at those trend lines, right, from 16 to wherever, and you look at the plus or minus, in order for that to be relevant, you have to assume that you were optimized back in 2016. Otherwise, it's just data. So I think it would help level set for everyone if we could understand specifically, building by building, what we're investing where, and understand, how we may be able to pull some things back, out, consolidate, whatever it is.
Okay. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Is that then information that the demographer will have access to? Or will that be completely separate?
Yeah, as long as you brought that up, Mr. Offers sent a long list of data that we're just starting to collect for him. He sent it late last week or early this week. So we're creating a folder of yes, a wide variety of data that he'll use to work from. So he'll have access to that if he needs it. Any other areas that the board wants us to be particularly cognizant of? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Mr. Vigut. Yeah, all right.
Perfect. Thank you. Stop me at any point with questions that you have. I just want to give a little more detail and give some examples of things we could do that would help to balance the budget. So just give a little summary. We've talked about that $3.5 million deficit number. We've done this before, but I want to break it down so we can focus on this next year and what we're going to do. We have $1.2 million in positions specifically added in response to COVID funded out of ESSER that we know cannot continue because they're ESSER funded positions specifically, as I said, for COVID response, so we just can't move those forward. We have a $716,000 budget deficit that we adopted this year. The last couple of years, you've adopted budget deficits. In most cases, I'm not going to do it, but if you go all the way back to that previous slide, you'll see that you adopt a budget deficit, and then in most cases, you come out okay. You spend a little less than you adopted. So And then what that brings us to, if you take those two things out, we come to the $1.5 million budget deficit specifically for next year. So that's really what I'm going to focus on as we move forward, because we know the other two pieces. And we're going to assume that we're comfortable carrying some sort of deficit budget going forward because it's worked out for us historically. And we feel comfortable with the 3 to 5 year budget projection. So,
Hey, Josh, just to clarify, the 1.2 million, that's accounted for, that will be netted out of the budget. So the working deficit is 2.21.
right,
Okay.
Exactly. And the 2.2 includes the 716.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
I will say, to be completely and fully transparent, that's not all that's currently being funded out of ESSER, but those are the positions specifically added in response to COVID, if that makes sense. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on this slide is that compounding effect of current budget actions. It's just whatever action we take will impact the budget in future years down the road. So.
I'm sorry, so you said there's other things that are being funded out of ESSER?
Yep, and this would be a good time for me to explain some of why that is. We had, before my time, we had multiple years recently where there was no revenue limit increase in the state. So as a district, we had no more additional dollars to spend relative per pupil. And by necessity, and not just here, many other districts across the state, operational expenses were paid for through ESSER, so funding. So it's just what happened. That's where we are. So thank you for asking that question.
So how much of our existing budget then is currently funded through ESSER that is going away that we now have to cover through
So
standard funding?
It has to move into Fund 10, right? That's what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty close to that 1.5 number.
So that's what's included in that 1.5.
Pretty close, yeah.
Makes sense. Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
But because there was no increase in the budget years ago, and then getting to this point, and as you're stating, not only we felt the increase, but other districts who were really struggling, they used a lot of that ESSER money. Now they're gonna be in tough shape.
It's a part of the, yeah.
We don't have to discuss that, but there are going to be a lot of districts that are going to be in tough shape because of the fact that they've used that ESSER money with the knowledge that it's going away.
I think it's one part of the reason you're seeing some,
Operating referendums? Many this year.
yeah.
Many.
So we just talked about some of these factors, but how did we get here? We have had inflation outpacing our revenues. We have self-funded health insurance, and we've had we had 10 or so great years in a row, and we've had a couple rough years last year and then this year, so we have that. Last year, we did 5% salary increases across the board, and our revenue limit increased less than 3% per pupil. And that is not the whole context. Of course, we were experiencing hyperinflation, so it's something that we have to consider as well. We do have that increased staffing that we just talked about. We do have some continued decreasing enrollment and how that affects our total budget. And then I know that we're currently looking at our facility footprint, so it's just another thing for us to keep in mind. What are some immediate options we have for balancing the budget? We can always look at staffing efficiencies. We're certainly looking at that now. We could do something in terms of limited salary changes. We brought a 3% assumption to you in January and talked about it again at the last board meeting. That was just an assumption. We could do something different. We could reduce other recurring costs. That's a much more limited lever in terms of what we can do there. It's a much smaller piece of the pie. We do have, at this moment, a healthy fund balance. So that could be used as a one-time stopgap measure to help offset the current deficit. You can't do that too many times, otherwise you no longer have a healthy fund balance. And then there's always room for other creative budget solutions. An example I'd like to give is that some of our neighboring districts have opened their middle school athletics to all students in the district, whether they are public, private, homeschooled students. And then they are funding those middle school athletics out of Fund 80, their community fund. So that's a creative budget solution that some districts are pursuing. We've talked a lot about this, but what are some other longer term options? We can always go out for operational referendum, and we can always become a more efficient school district, whether that's in terms of our footprint and optimizing that, or in terms of how we are looking at staffing. So the next slide is a couple examples of things we could do, not recommendations, but just examples of things we could do that would balance the budget. I've made some assumptions moving into those examples, so I just thought it'd be healthy to read through those. We talked about that we're comfortable carrying some sort of budget deficit, both in terms of, because of historically how that's come out for us, and how we feel about the budget 3 to 5 years down the road, assuming we take some action on this year's budget. We do have those COVID response specific positions that we know cannot move forward. We are focusing on that $1.5 million deficit for 24-25. We are exploring staffing efficiencies in all areas. This is by no means specific to one specific area, nor should it be. We are using that 3% salary increase number from the January and February board meetings. We are acknowledging that a 1% change in that salary projection impacts the budget by roughly $750,000. So if we increase the salary amount, that makes the deficit more, and the inverse is also true. We know we are continuing to explore the impacts of the elementary footprint, and in terms of health insurance, we know that we are exploring plan, contribution, and premium changes going forward. Any question on those assumptions?
Josh, do you know, how are we trending in our fiscal year to date? Given that we had the mild winter, given that we didn't have as much maintenance, utilities cost, how are we looking overall? Because, I mean, we're running July 1 to June 30, right?
Yep.
So how are we doing 9 months into this year's budget?
I would say both that you're correct that we didn't have as much of those things like plowing, salting, things like that, but that by far the biggest piece of our budget is staffing. So I think we'll probably come out about where we projected, with the wild card being that health insurance cost. As of last month, we were running about 130%, and that would be a direct hit to our fund balance if it comes out that way. So,
Could you send the board like where we're at through February 29th?
sure,
I would just be curious to
Yeah.
see how those two are trending.
sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Someone will have to remember that. Thank you. Again, I wanted to emphasize that these are examples, kind of for discussion to get board feedback. These are not recommendations. So what could we do? We could adjust salaries by 1% instead of 3%. This would eliminate $1.5 million from the budget forecast, essentially creating a balanced budget. We know that CPI for salaries was pegged at about 4.08%, so just something to keep in mind. We could look at implementing district-wide staffing reductions of approximately 15 to 20 FTE, and that can come a variety of ways and efficiencies. The other thing, we know we have this elementary footprint study, so we can look at efficiencies, reductions, salary changes, while awaiting the results of that elementary footprint study and any actions that would happen as kind of a direct result of that. Or we could pursue a combination of all of these things. But these are some examples of things we could do that would create a balanced budget for next year.
What did you say the CPI projected to be?
4.08, 4.12. Yeah.
Okay, 4.12. And to adjust that 3% to 1% based on next year and knowing how it is to maintain staff, that would be a very difficult thing to do, I would think.
we certainly have to engage in negotiations.
Right, just putting that out there, that would become a real problem in itself. Not just that, but tack that on to the fact that there are not a lot of teachers out there to begin with, and we'd be hunting and trying to find. It'd be very difficult.
Josh, when you, the 750,
Yep.
is that, that includes all our employees? When you say we move by 1%,
Yep,
is
that's all
750 is
employees.
everybody?
Yes, thank you for asking.
Can you do a breakdown between the four groups as teachers, admin, support,
Like if we
maintenance?
moved a certain salary group a certain amount and a different group a different amount.
You're asking that everything is on the table, so
I
presenting
welcome
us
this
with-
feedback. And
right?
Yeah, I
Presenting
totally
us
want to
with
have
the
this
data
conversation.
is
Yep.
all we're looking at this point, because we don't accept this until October-ish,
Yeah,
typically, right?
we can totally bring, if that's something you're interested in, we can bring that to you.
Well, I think that's going to be very important, considering the fact that if you're talking teachers, you're going to be talking administration, you're going to be talking where we're at with our paras, you're going to take a look at every level. I need to say no more.
Maybe you can't say specifically what staffing positions are funded by the ESSER ones that will go away, but are there any that are kind of real high priority that we would attempt to keep, or
Any position.
could answer that later if
Yeah.
you don't know that?
Let me confirm and get back
Yeah.
to you.
Josh, one other question is, how many, so we've got, if I read the numbers right, about 1,145 FTEs that are in the budget. How many vacant positions are we carrying month to month in the forecast?
I would actually defer to Tabitha. Do you know?
Roughly right now, we probably have 3 to 5 that are unfilled. But at various points in the year, we have actually filled in some areas, some others not. So for example, paraeducators, we had a lot that were unfilled at the beginning of the year. We filled all of the positions right now. I think they all are filled other than maybe one recent resignation. Teachers, I think we had 2 pupil services positions not filled all year, because we didn't have candidates. So it just, each group varies.
Okay, and I only throw that out there because that's one technique that is you commonly used. If you don't fill a position for so long, then you question, do you need it?
We're using that, yep. That's been discussed as a part of our staffing.
And we could identify specific groups, but I don't want to get into that right now.
Okay. Any other questions? This is most of what I had for you tonight.
One thing I just am wondering, when you move over to the implement staffing reductions, approximately 15 to 20 FTEs, would that be, again, approximately 1.5 million then to balance? If
Yeah.
you get those 15 to 20 FTEs, it'd be the
Yes.
same?
Yep.
Okay.
Is it okay to assume that if those reductions would take place, we are cutting some classes as well? And then how would we replace those classes?
I would say that all options are on the table, and we would certainly want board feedback on those things. So,
Yeah, we've been looking pretty thoroughly at all of our staffing. When we look at staffing, we look at student enrollment, right? Elementaries are pretty straightforward. We have our classroom guidelines. High schools are much more complex because we try to meet the classes that the students are actually enrolling in. So that we have to kind of balance in, what are the trends, right? Is, 1 year a class may not run, that doesn't mean we cut that class, right? We have to, kind of carry that over for a little bit. But so we really staff based on student need. Even earlier when we talked about the CISA role and the 2 therapists, we're hiring those maybe short term. That's based on student need that we've identified. So that'll be so we will bring you some options. Like I say, across the board, they really try to make sure we don't impact kids negatively.
And Corey, that's exactly what I was asking before about the school by school budget, because we're looking for 1.2%, I think, is what I figured budget wise. And if you get that school by school, I'm confident that we can get there without negatively impacting courses or people that are in front of kids every day.
Yeah, and if CISA is, a more economical option for some of the services to fill in our holes, then obviously you guys are looking at that as well, because that's a little bit of a la carte type service to take care of what, instead of us trying to have a even half-time person, where we can get it from them and make it easier, and that person is shared with other districts then to make it a full-time position at CISA.
And kind of piggybacking on that, going back to the fact that that's why CISAs are so important to the districts within the CISAs, so that we don't have to absorb the full cost of a full FTE. We can pick that up through CISA, and those would be things that we think about. But as you've said, and we've said, everything's on the table. I think we need to be aware of the fact that with that $1.2 million, we're going to have to be taking a look at the fact that some courses may be affected by that. I mean, it's a reality of registration, which we've asked for, and I think that's very important so that we get a good idea on that, because we don't want random departments losing class sections just because we're going to try to cut that. But at the same time, we have to have the realization that it could happen. It may not; those courses may not run this year, depending on the enrollment again. So that's got to be on the table, and we need to be aware of that. But it would be very helpful with the budget situation for us to know, the registration situation and where we are at.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for me? All right. It's important and it's hard, and I appreciate it, so thank you.
Well, this is still part of everything, and so you'll be bringing more information
Yes.
to us, and
Yep.
we'll be making bigger decisions down the road as we move on. So, all right, with that information, as referendum-funded improvement plans developed for each facility, the board will see updates when the designs reach 50%. Current plans for Maine Elementary School were shared with the board at the Educational Operations Committee meeting last month. Are there any additional bits of information? Okay, moving on. Any questions at this point in time by the board? If not, I'll move on. 5-year fiscal forecast at the Educational Operations Committee meeting last month. The board was presented with a 5-year fiscal forecast model for the district. The projection model will continue to be applied during the next 3 months to aid in constructing the 24-25 budget reconciliation plan and ultimately the 24-25 budget. It is critical to understand that the projections are the result of many variables that independently change periodically. As significant changes to the projections occur, administration will bring them to the attention of the board. Bits of information for you. Anything needed to be added? Nothing?
No, that's part of the process we're talking about here.
Okay. So we'll continue to move on. Educational operations, agenda item number 9, Operation Committee meeting. Estimated time is what? Do we have a presentation or anything? Any additional?
We need action on those ELA curriculum
Correct.
sequence.
Correct. So there are no additional items. So I'm seeking a motion to move to approve the implementation of the proposed 9-12 ELA course sequences at the start of the 25-26 school year at both East and West.
So moved.
Any questions? Any follow-up questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Neola. At the Education Operations Committee meeting last month, the board was presented with suggested changes to the Neola policies. Are there any comments since then by any board members? Any questions that you had picked up on that you might have?
No, the changes we discussed are in there.
Yep.
So, yep. Should
Okay.
be good.
I was looking to see if there were any additional items. If not, I'm seeking a motion to approve the Neola policies as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Professional growth and development report. Is there anything to report from any of the board members? I don't have anything, so I'm going to continue to move on. Legislative liaison, Mr. Sillers, do you have anything?
I gave you guys a handout about one of a just informational session that Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty program they were going to put on coming up in April. There's I think we got an email about another one. There seems to be a few here in April, probably just to coincide with new boards kind of being formed right here in April around the state. And at CISA 9 we had a review of our director, which went well, and he's staying. So
Thank you. That's important.
yeah. Otherwise, I continued to attempt to engage with our current legislative persons, elected officials on our issues, and try to make headway. Congressman Tiffany has, along, I believe, with Kyle Van Orden, had introduced legislation in Congress about helping out with the refugees and other students that we spoke of earlier, those different groups coming to the state and helping to create some reforms and attempting to give that local control to school boards or to cities to help with resettling them. So I'll be watching that and try to talk with Congressman about that issue as well. And that's all I have on legislative.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let me see. Dr. Hills, any additional items?
Do just a couple of really light items. I'd like to thank Mrs. Hummel, first grade at Thomas Jefferson. Got a chance to read one of our favorite childhood books, and the kids made a bunch of artwork and cards. It was just fun. So thank you to Mrs. Hummel and her students for that. And then earlier today, we were very fortunate to receive a donation from Shooty Metals to purchase a FANUC robot for the Wausau East Tech Ed Department. They purchased one for the West Tech Ed Department last year. Shooty Metals has been a wonderful partner for us, and so we got this just today. John Winter he would have been here tonight, but he's coaching baseball, so it's that season. Tonight's the first night, so thank you to Shooty Metals for that very generous donation. That's all I've got.
Well, and that is a big donation. We greatly appreciate that, Shooty Metals, and all that they have done for education in our district. So, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, I'd like to reference written board member liaison district activity report. Nothing. It's going to get busy in the next couple of months, I believe, with all the graduations and all of the awards ceremonies that will be going on at the high schools. I'm sure many of you have already started to receive some of those invitations by the staff, so hopefully we can get to those. All right, with that, I'm seeking a motion to go into close, discuss human resources staffing of 19.851C. And so I'm going to ask for a motion to go into close, and then we'll have a roll call.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay,
Oh, you're third.
all right, all in favor? Aye.
Call.
We got roll call that
Oh,
though.
excuse me, and I just said that, did I not? Ready
Jack
to move
Kreischer?
it along.
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Cody Nicolai?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli? Joanna Reyes? Corey Sillers?
Yes.
Lance Trollope?
Yes.
Karen Vandenberg?
Yes.
Jim Boucher?
Yes. Now we can make